Good day. I'm Martin Gagel with Market Radius Research. It's Monday, April the 11th, and we've got CEO Andy Duncan and CFO Charlie Glavin of Boardwalk Software joining us. Boardwalk provides low-code collaboration software for the enterprise market. I'm eager to have Boardwalk back here, as it was almost to the day a year ago that they first joined us, and I appreciate them supporting me, as that was really in the first few weeks of this platform. So thanks for supporting me, and thanks for coming back to discuss the business. Boardwalk has further developed its platform over the year and won significant accounts over the last year, including most recently an announced one with a major New York-based bank. I'm still trying to understand the growth drivers for the coming year as the company continues to grow its SaaS business. But please remember, this is neither a recommendation nor investment advice. We are here to learn about the company. Andy and Charlie, thank you very much for joining us, and let's hear the pitch on Boardwalk.
Thanks, Martin. Andy Duncan here, and really appreciate the opportunity to join you and to continue to support your great platform at Radius. So let me walk you through, everybody, kind of Boardwalk, and I think Martin will be asking some questions as we go along, and I encourage you to also throw questions into the Q&A session that we'll do at the end. And Charlie, our CFO, is here also, and many of you know him, and he's very happy to answer questions as well. So as Martin stated, we are a digital ledger data management platform. We focus on helping large enterprises digitally transform their information. And the vision that we have at Boardwalktech, Martin, is to really create a single version of the truth for all enterprise information by helping these companies to unify both their unstructured and their structured data so that they can make faster, more insightful decisions. You know, data and the knowledge is power. And when you look at companies that actually can grasp the data that they have, understand it, and make faster decisions, these are going to be the leading companies going forward. And I'm awfully proud of what we've been able to accomplish at Boardwalk, focusing on helping these companies to be able to better understand their data, manage their data, and make decisions faster. So if you kind of take a look at the enterprise as a whole, we love to talk about the fact that the enterprise data is a mess. And because of that, what we've established and what we've built is this Boardwalk digital ledger platform that helps companies be able to get control of their data. So on the left-hand side here, you will see a pretty common scenario that we see across a lot of these large companies, where they've spent a tremendous amount of money on their core transactional systems of record, like SAP, Oracle, Salesforce.com, ServiceNow, and all of the data that's sitting in these environments, Martin, are structured information. But what we see is that companies really spend a lot of time capturing data from different places within the organization. And as they're capturing that data, because the enterprise is very complex, they got to have a place to put it. And lots of times, historically, companies will take this information and they'll put it into Microsoft Excel, which is the #1 application in the world today in business, 1.3 billion users of Excel. And the reason that they put it into Excel is because that's what we learned at business school. That's the application, and it allows you to align the data. And so what happens is that information gets flowing into these Excel spreadsheets because people don't have any other tool to be able to understand and analyze the data. As that starts to happen, people start to email these spreadsheets around, and before you know it, you've got 50 people that are trying to share a spreadsheet, trying to make decisions off of the information that's in the spreadsheet, and no one knows who changed what data, when it was changed, why it was changed. You just know that the data in the current spreadsheet that you're looking at in cell M21 is 2 million units versus what it was last week, which is 1 million units. And quite frankly, that's not a really good way to run a business. But yet this is very common throughout most enterprises where they've spent all this money on their core transactional systems of record, but they have all of this unstructured data that's running around that they need to get control of. So what Boardwalk does through our digital ledger platform is we create what we call the single version of the truth, where we can bring in all of this unstructured data into our digital ledger and allow people to start exchanging information, collaborating on the information, having a historical record of every change that's made throughout sharing this information, and allowing multiple people to work on the same data at the same time so that you really can get to a quick and fast decision. So the whole essence of Boardwalk is this digital ledger platform that is also known as a low-code application platform, which means you don't have to write any code. You basically can very rapidly take the information that's in these spreadsheets, put it into our digital ledger platform, and turn it into a real enterprise application with all of the access control, integration into other systems of record, the historical component, and allow people, multiple people to work on the same data at the same time. And it happens rapidly.
Andy, is
Yes,
with the Boardwalk platform, is Excel essentially the user interface into it? And so it's like you're using Excel, but it's powered by Boardwalk, which manages the data and who did what and so forth? Or is it your own portal where you go in and you sort of just input the data from your Excel, and then you've kind of got a Google Sheets or an online spreadsheet where you're manipulating and looking at stuff?
Yeah, great question. So we are agnostic with regard to the user interface into the digital ledger. I will say that about 80% of the information that's out there that we help companies transform is in Microsoft Excel. And because that's just where the data historically has been stored. And that's where these large companies have built a lot of processes, a lot of applications within Microsoft Excel. And to give you an example, the large bank that we announced last week has tens of thousands of these Microsoft Excel spreadsheets that are throughout the bank that are not in compliance. And the bank truly is running a lot of the business off of the information that's in these Excel spreadsheets. Now, they do have other areas where this data resides, and that kind of takes us to talking a little bit about what really is unstructured data. So certainly information that's in an Excel spreadsheet is an unstructured piece of data, but there's also other unstructured data that sits in PDF files, in HTML and Word documents. And it's interesting that about 80% of all of the data today in an enterprise is unstructured. And the other interesting thing, Martin, about this is that 90% of all data in existence today has been created in the past 2 years. So that will tell you the absolute, enormous amount of data and the problem that these enterprises are facing today, which is if I've got 20% of my data in my transactional systems of record, like Oracle and SAP, what am I doing to manage the other 80% of my data and all of this unstructured data that includes stuff in Microsoft Excel? And that is Boardwalk's mission. We are all about how do we help these companies transition to be able to get this unstructured data into a digital environment so that they can make sense of it, their employees can have control of the data, and the employees can start to make better and faster decisions. And the big data market itself, according to global industry analysts, is about a $50 billion business by 2026. This is a major, major problem in the enterprise. And we really believe that we're on just the beginning stages of something that's really going to be a terrific market for us.
Martin, Martin, if I could, one thing that Andy alluded to, but for anyone who's new to the story, this isn't about having an Excel add-on or having a shared spreadsheet. The actual platform, this was a unique software structure, a true platform, is the ability for every single transaction in a given cell is timestamped. And so you have an audit trail along with provenance within it. So whether or not you're sharing the same spreadsheet across a conference room table, across a campus, or having hundreds, if not thousands of people working on the same model, the same data set at the same time, you can have that working together, which what Andy alluded to, while maintaining that single version of the truth. It's not just a matter of efficiency going forward, but there's ever a problem, and I had this whether at Credit Suisse or within the semi industry, reconciliation of any sort of problem. You can do this in a matter of minutes, not hours, or what's worse is sending emails back and forth to try and reconcile. And that is the true power and why you're not just seeing financial institutions, but also those within the supply chain like Estee Lauder do multiple applications with us.
Right. So Martin, so the way that we make money is we have the Boardwalk Digital Ledger low-code platform that we license on a SaaS basis into an enterprise. We believe that this is kind of the last mile of digital transformation, and that the Boardwalk platform for managing all of that 80% of the unstructured data in an enterprise is just as important, if not more important, than the transactional systems that they have with SAP, Oracle, Salesforce.com that they pay a lot of money for. So this particular slide talks about the fact that we are becoming a very important part of the stack, if not the leading platform and application environment within a traditional stack. And we tie all of those applications together because there's information that's coming out of SAP and Oracle and Salesforce.com and Slack and Workday and all of the Microsoft Office tools like Excel that allows us to be able to help these companies kind of tie it all together and digitally transform all of this unstructured data and their IP that they have in these spreadsheets without having to go re-platform or rewrite the application. So again, a low-code application, or platform, which is what we are, allows us to be able to very rapidly absorb already in existence spreadsheet applications, if you will, and turn them rapidly into enterprise applications. And we do that without having to write a single line of code because you're basically just configuring it on the platform. So we believe that by providing collaboration and working with multiple parties on the same data at the same time, whether you're remote or not, really will help improve the results. We also help to improve the security, the auditability, compliance, and really where the value proposition comes in is that if you can make a decision faster because you've got better data, that's going to be able to really drive the business. So we think of ourselves almost as like the Bloomberg of an enterprise for data, right? You think about Bloomberg brought all of this information onto a single platform, a single version of the truth that allows you to be able to go do your research and have real-time data, be able to use that platform to collaborate with people through IM and all the other kind of stuff. We do exactly the same thing, but instead of us focusing in on stocks and financials and all of the stuff that Bloomberg does great, we focus in on all the unstructured data, helping companies really get their arms around it so that people can make a decision faster, right? Imagine if you didn't have Bloomberg today, where you could go to your terminal, hit something, look at it and go, okay, I'm going to make a decision right now because they just hit a particular level that I'm interested in. Well, in data in the enterprise, especially unstructured data, no one has got a handle on that data. So you got to go research and spend a lot of time in order to get to a decision. And if we can provide the ability for people to make a decision faster, this is going to drive really good results within the business. Okay.
When you're making pitches to management teams, you're on a sales pitch basis, you don't have like, oh, we got a different spreadsheet or we got a different ERP. You've got a whole new product or a service that you're offering. Does it take your clients a long time to say, oh, wow, you're saying lots of great buzzwords and stuff, but like, how exactly do you do this? Is there a long customer journey that they have to go through?
Yeah, so I would certainly say that our sales process is getting better. And there's a couple of reasons for that, Martin. One is we stay very focused on certain core industries, right? And Charlie will tell you that I refuse to let the company go off into ancillary industries where we don't have a lot of experience. And so we've really been focused on areas that we know well, that include CPG, manufacturing, with a specific focus on supply chain. And of course, we're big in tax, which is our largest customers, or our largest customer was before the bank came in, Ernst & Young, where we're integrated into their tax technology platform. So again, think of in tax all of the spreadsheets that are bouncing around, audit all the spreadsheets that are bouncing around. So the bottom line is that if you stay focused on this in areas that you know where there's a lot of spreadsheets, there's a lot of unstructured data, and there's a lot of need to make rapid decisions based upon timely data, that's where we focus. With the bank client, by the way, one of the interesting things there is that we were not pursuing this bank client. We were brought in by a large $10 billion revenue New York Stock Exchange publicly traded company that has the bank as a client. And the bank actually was penalized by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, $400 million. This was very well publicized. There was press releases put out about it, where they said, you've got to get control of these unstructured data and these spreadsheets. And so this partner came to us and said, they're a customer of ours, so they use the software. They're a partner of ours. And they came to us and said, this bank is a big customer of ours. We've got a lot of people assigned to this bank in India doing a lot of work. They've got a problem, and we think your platform would be the best to solve this. So as we kind of went through that particular journey, that particular client, the sales cycle was long. It took us about 15 months start to finish, but it was because we started in one business unit, went to the second business unit, went to the third business unit, of which this bank is broken into 3 major business units. And then we went up to an enterprise deal where we went all the way to the top of the organization, where we now will be across the entire enterprise. And so, to answer your question, we're certainly seeing a lot of faster closes, especially in the supply chain stuff that we're doing. One of the large companies that we announced in supply chain is a very large social media company that's based in Northern California. We are unable to use their name, but I think everyone understands who it is. And they have this huge issue going on with regard to their supply chain. You wouldn't think that a social media company has got supply chain issues, but when you spend $2 billion to buy a company that does AI and augmented reality with goggles, you understand the path that they're going, which is to enhance their platform with devices. And so they brought us in to basically say, we really need a different type of solution than the traditional solutions that are out there with regard to supply chain. And they just are all over what we're doing with them. And that was a pretty rapid cycle that we've seen there. So, and their whole issue was, gee, we spent a lot of money on these big transactional systems of record here, but it's old school. It's the old way of trying to manage data in a structured environment, which is very costly, takes a lot of time. And they would literally need to query data across their platform, and it would take a day or two. And it's like, we don't have a day or two. I need to know right now what my inventory is across 6 distribution centers. And the Boardwalk Digital Ledger platform allows them to be able to self-query the data and basically come up with that answer. And then they can make a decision. Do I put in a larger order? Do I put in a smaller order? Can I meet the demand of this new customer that's coming in? A lot of really interesting stuff with regard to managing this data. So it's all about connecting the structured data with the unstructured data, again, 20% structured data, 80% unstructured, into the single version of the truth, the digital ledger platform, and then allowing that to be visualized across multiple user interfaces, whether it's mobile, a browser, Excel, or connecting into some of their other visualization tools around machine learning and AI.
Okay.
So you had talked, or you had asked the question earlier about kind of where do we see a lot of use cases within our platform? And again, this will kind of talk about the different use cases that we've got around financial planning and analysis, right? So even though these companies, again, have spent all this money on, an ERP system, Oracle or SAP or whatever, the Microsoft, whatever they're using, guess what happens with all the financial planning and analysis? It all gets dumped out to a spreadsheet. And then the spreadsheets get emailed around. And this is exactly the problem that we're solving. Packaging management for Estee Lauder is a fascinating problem that they have. So they've got tens of thousands of products. They sell into 150 countries or more. Every country has a different requirement with regard to packaging, what needs to be on the label of a product. And you've got to disclose the contents of what's in your particular product. So every time something like that changes, the packaging changes. And so when they came to us, they said, we've got a problem with our managing all of our packaging information. And we said, well, how do you do it today? And they said, well, here's our big, hairy spreadsheet across literally hundreds of people trying to manage all of these changes. And we literally took that, moved it with no code into the Boardwalk Digital Ledger platform, and in a matter of weeks, created a collaborative application utilizing the IP that they had already developed in the spreadsheets, allowing them to continue to use that user interface, but now improving the process so dramatically that they now can get product to market faster because they're better managing the packaging information that they've got to have in order to get out there. And managing data that's on packaging isn't something that you would think is important, but anybody that's manufacturing product has got the same problem. And there's no cloud-based application that's out there to manage packaging data. You know what I'm saying? It's all done in these spreadsheets. And so this is that last mile, a great example of the last mile of digital transformation that these companies need to go through. And so what we say is, tell us where it hurts the most, show us the biggest problem that you've got. Every time we do that with a client, they say, here's a big hairy spreadsheet that I need, that's shared by hundreds of people, and we don't know who made a change to any of the cells. We don't know what version we're on. It's a complete mess. And we step in and say, we'll take that, we'll put it into our digital ledger. Here's how it works, and off we go. And in fact, I can show you, if we have time at the end of this, Martin, some different user examples that I think when people see that, that's kind of part of this, our presentation today, it kind of comes to light. We also do a lot in tax planning, trade procurement, spend management. So Coca-Cola spends about $3.5 billion a year on trade promotion. So what is that? Well, that's when they go to Walmart and they say, we want you to put Coke on an end cap, and we'll give you a 12% per case discount, and we need for you to commit to 1 million cases for next week. And it's, okay, well, how do you negotiate all that? What's the pricing? What if they only get to 800,000 cases versus 1,000,000 cases? Is that going to be in 3,400 stores or in 340 stores? So all of that is managed, by the way, in big, hairy spreadsheets. And when you can create the ability to bring all that data together, marry it with the structured data, and create a much better environment, you create this great collaboration environment. You get to a real efficient environment. You get to compliance, which is one of the major drivers that we're working on with the bank. And then the analytics here allows you to be able to get to faster, better decisions. So a couple of case studies. Investors always love case studies. So this happens to be in one of the big parts of our business, Martin, is what we call our land and expand strategy. So remember that we're a platform. We are part of this technology stack that the IT people within an enterprise think about, spend a lot of money on every year to be able to solve problems. And every day they're working on, how do I improve the platform? We just happen to be that we're going to fix that 80% of the unstructured data that's out there. We believe that most enterprises literally have hundreds of these mission critical spreadsheet processes that are out there that need to be transformed into a digital environment. It just so happens that the bank that we've been talking about has tens of thousands, as opposed to call it a $2 billion mid-cap company that might have 100 of these types of applications that need to be moved into a digital environment. So when we land a customer, this isn't about just solving one problem. This is about solving their entire problem with regard to unstructured data and increasing the amount of SaaS revenue that we drive from that customer by adding additional spreadsheet applications onto the platform and continuing to increase our annual revenue from that client. So as Charlie can talk about, in 2018, previous to 2018, we sold a lot of perpetual licenses. We transitioned over to a SaaS model. It's been the best thing that we've ever done. But through that transition and with the SaaS model, one of the things that we really focus on is how can we continue to increase revenue, not only from our existing customers, but from also land new logos. For an existing customer, this is a great example where this is an apparel client that's based in the New England area. And the boxes here are representing different applications that they have in the supply chain that currently or were using spreadsheets to manage the data. So they have something called raw material planning. Well, what does that mean, raw material planning? I mean, that is where you've got a manufacturing facility, but you got to make sure you've got the right raw material that's coming into the manufacturing facility, like cotton or silk or whatever. And so there's a lot of planning that goes on with that. Okay. And so what this represents here would be all of the different supply chain applications for a particular business unit that they have. And the ones in blue, we actually have built applications on the platform now, and we've seen an increasing revenue from this particular client. The ones in white we're still working on with them. And there's always a timing issue of, okay, when do we start the next project? When do we start the next project? And so it'll just give you an idea of the kind of the plethora of the opportunity that we have that we're sitting on. And this particular client, just by doing these 5 applications, was a 5x ROI, about a $1.3 million first year savings, and was a pretty significant ROI. So once we get in and we really start working with them on solving these problems, the ROI becomes pretty rapid. This next case study is an interesting one, a customer that we've had for a while called On Semiconductor. And we built this application for them, which was in a series of applications, I don't know, a year or two ago. And here's the business problem. They were getting in about 25 RFQs a day from their customers. So they build chips, and they have customers like Dell. And Dell would come to them and say, we need 1 million chips with the following attributes, and we need it by this date. What's it going to cost? And Dell's going to go out to 15 different chip manufacturers and say, what do you think? And so what was happening was that on semiconductor, it was taking them 7 to 10 days to respond to these RFQs, because it all came in spreadsheets, and they had to disperse the spreadsheets across their organization, get every business unit to come back to say, yes, I can do this, here's my price. Then they had to go back and research, what did they charge them last time for a similar chip? What were the margins, all of this stuff. And so it's very complicated. It was taking them about 10 days to respond to an RFQ. Well, we took exactly that process. We put it into Boardwalk. We reduced the response time down to now 2 days, which increased their sales conversion by about 20%, which means that the faster you can respond to an RFQ, the higher chance you've got of being able to get the deal. And so this is a great example of lots of spreadsheets, lots of collaboration, history being very important, improving the process by digitally transforming it, and really turning this into a rapid success. By the way, without having to write one line of code, this particular project done I think it took us about 6 weeks, and it's been up and running beautifully now for 1.5 years, with onsemi being very happy and continuing to look for other areas within their organization to deploy Boardwalk. So some of our clients that we have today, this is one of the pretty interesting value propositions of Boardwalk. Although we are small and mighty and growing well, or certainly into this next year, one of the things that we've done pretty well, Martin, is being able to land some pretty sizable customers and some big names. You'll see, Apple Computer on here, General Mills, Mars, Qualcomm, Verizon, and then of course the big bank that we can't name, that we can certainly get into a little bit more information. But the key here is that this is a great list of logos. We're proud to have everyone as a customer, and we're continuing in every one of these companies to land and expand and to grow the revenue base that we've got in these with these customers.
And on that, when you do, let's say with On Semiconductor, they have that one application, you then charge them, that's on a SaaS basis, they pay that in perpetuity as long as they're using it. And then if they say, hey, we have a different application, then you would bill them again for a different application that maybe manages, I don't know, supplier or some other aspect of their business. So that's an expanded. Okay, now we have 2 applications going.
Yeah, and so it's interesting in enterprise software. You kind of struggle sometimes with the pricing model to get it right, and it takes time. I mean, you even look at Microsoft and Salesforce and some of the other companies, Oracle. They still struggle with their pricing model where they've got multiple pricing models. What we found is that if you tried to charge per user, then sometimes when you went to them for a price, people would go, oh, I don't want to add another 100 users because that's going to cost me X. So we basically price this per application on the platform. So there's a price for the platform, and then there's a price per application. And what we really believe the long term here is that we'll get to these enterprise deals, much like we've done with the bank, much like we've done with one other company, where we effectively get to kind of a 7-figure deal that says, all you can eat, here's the platform, pay us on an annual basis. And our goal here is, we think that there's easily hundreds of these large organizations that have got lots and lots of spreadsheet processes and unstructured data that need to be digitally transformed. And it's not, we think it's very possible that these companies will pay us $1 million plus per year for an enterprise license. So again, do the math and think about, okay, so Boardwalk over the next, 36 months can land, 100 or 200 large organizations, paying them, $500,000 to $1 million a year on a recurring basis at a high margin. It's a heck of a good business, and we think it's going to be very valuable in the future going forward, because we're solving a really big problem in the enterprise, and we're solving it differently than anybody else. And this is a real key. The digital ledger that we've built that manages data with a timestamp, manages data at the atomic unit level, is different than a traditional method of being able to solve this problem. And those very wise CIOs across these companies that we're working with now and the ones that are in the future that understand this really grasp it, and they latch on, and off we go.
Martin,
So, yeah,
Martin,
go ahead, Charlie.
if I could, forgive me, but did I hear you use the word perpetual?
I did.
Well, yeah. So Martin, just something that's very clear. The company has not had a perpetual license contract since 2015. So the best way to look at it is, prior to that period, it was really in a proof of concept or startup phase overall. The reason why we haven't used the word perpetual in a lot of our financial disclosures, we do use it selectively, is you offer that out, and guess what? Customers want to do a perpetual license, because of course they want to do it. They get a huge upside off of it. And yes, even with this recent large bank and others, we get the ask. The more that we can say definitively that for the last 7 years we haven't done any perpetual license, we don't. So that's to our advantage from a negotiation. Here's the key point, and I want to make sure it's clarified. There are customers who did previously have perpetual licenses that we are converting into recurring licenses. This caused a little bit of a blur in regards to what you've referred to, I think, previously as a legacy, because we're converting them. And that's the best way to describe it. The other thing that I would point out is, while we're targeting $1 million, per customer, and we've already got 3, in the hopper on that, there are several others on track. But the important thing to remember is, some companies want to sign a $1 million plus license and then roll it out because they want to dictate it. There are other customers who we're working with their budget. So I won't specify which one, but there's somebody who signed a $250,000 contract, and then they realize each of their business units only have budgets up to, say, 100,000. So it wouldn't have made sense to push and force this on others, but rather get, again, I'll use the word convert these others, 250, these business unit, the people, general managers, CIOs of the individual business units within their budgets can then desire to add on our platform, as opposed to being jammed down into them. Then all of a sudden you get 4 additional applications at between 50 and 100,000. Now you've added on, 300,000-400,000. So my point is, there's multiple ways to get to the 1 million plus, target from a recurring. And it all depends on how the customer's needs are and how their business structure is done. Is it a top-down matrix organization? But what the key point is, we're making traction on multiple fronts of having each one of the customers eventually get to that level.
Just as a side, I understand how you interpreted what I actually meant by my perpetual comment is kind of, you're an enterprise important platform. And once you're on a SaaS, people in we got to pay our rent again and again next year, because they're reliant upon it. That was my angle, what I was kind of getting at, but obviously that not clear definition of words given your historical.
Yeah, I think if we were more accurate, we'd call ourselves a platform as a service, a PaaS. But given that enough people have trouble figuring out what a SaaS is, we opted for the more familiar vernacular. But for those who may not be familiar, each of our licenses are 1 year. Oftentimes we'll do a multi-year in terms of the pricing. while still enabling us to add on additional licenses for new products, anything that's separately marketed. So that's where the upside can also occur. But we collect the revenue upfront and then put it on deferred revenue and then amortize it as a right to access each month. And so this isn't a renewal each and every single month, but over the course of the year, we not only have a discussion as far as how to maintain, but also how to expand, hence what Andy refers to as the land and expand.
Right. So from a cash flow standpoint, to be paid upfront on an annual basis, but then we recognize that revenue over a 1/12 period for the next 12 months. So lots of times so that cash obviously is very important to us. And that's one thing, Martin, that we may want to talk a little bit about, is that as we continue to kind of, our fiscal year just ended at the end of March. We really accomplished a lot this past fiscal year. We paid off all of the debt that we had. We did a large raise, last year that allowed us to be able to do that and allowed us to kind of really shore up the balance sheet, especially as we're kind of moving into this financial services industry. They're very keen on, what's your balance sheet look like. And so it was really helpful for us to get that debt paid off and get some cash on the balance sheet. And so, as we kind of continue into, what we did last year, we're very focused this year on making sure that we get to cash flow break even and to profitability. And with the bank deal that we did, that's going to basically take us there. From a timing perspective, I'll let Charlie talk about exactly what that is, but that's kind of the last leg on the stool besides revenue growth that we've been really focused on. And I think that you're going to see a real improvement here over the next couple of quarters.
Yep, great.
Yep. So, as a snapshot, obviously, you look at what we're doing. We've got 20 of the Fortune 500 as customers today. 60% of our revenue from multiple year annual recurring licenses. So we talked about the transition from perpetual to some of those old stuff that's hanging out. So that's getting better and better. Our pipeline continues to increase, Martin, and improve. And if you just broke out the recurring license revenue, we're growing at a 33% CAGR. Again, it's that old stuff versus the new stuff. And so if people really dug in, they would see that although the results may look flat from the end of the fiscal year or so, that that recurring license line is really growing beautifully. And then, of course, from a traction standpoint, I think it's important for everybody to understand this is very sticky, as you described earlier about paying rent. Once we get in and we get going, it's really hard for somebody to kind of stop doing this. I mean, if you think about the alternative, they'd actually have to go and take that spreadsheet and turn it into an application, which means they've got to spend a lot of money building the whole application onto something different. And that takes a lot of time. There's a lot of risk. Our land and expand, I think, is really starting to pay dividends, where we've got specific sales people and account managers on different accounts, and they're really working hard on landing and expanding. And you're going to see continued press releases from us about land and expand across our existing customer base. And then, of course, new customers. Certainly, this bank new customer is a great one, and we're very enthusiastic about the financial services channel that we're building out now, and that we think that this has really got a great opportunity to drive some growth for us, and with a very unique solution into that particular market. And then, of course, price increases as we add new features and capabilities where we can go back into customers and not only drive revenue from a land and expand strategy, but also from adding additional feature and capability and product into that to really help them focus on their unstructured data.
You also have with your business professional services, and that is when you develop when you first develop an app for someone and you implement it, you do a one-time charge for those services, and then it rolls into the annual SaaS revenues.
correct. I'm happy to let Charlie address this, but I will say that just to give a foundation for this, yes, we do have a professional services organization. We have a wholly owned subsidiary in India that we've had for a number of years. They're all our own employees. It really helps with the pricing and the margins on the professional services basis to have this team in India. It also will help us a lot with regard to the financial services kind of training work that we'll do, because a lot of the implementation work that will be done in India, and having local staff there is going to really help us as we move into financial services space. But the net is that, yes, the average takes about 4 to 6 weeks to implement one of these applications onto the platform. It's not that we're not writing any code, but we're basically doing a configuration where you spend 2 weeks building out kind of the process itself. You do 2 weeks of configuration, then you do 2 weeks of training and testing. And that 6 weeks we do charge for. We think it's important. As we continue to mature the product, we will get to the point where we have almost something that we would call like a citizen developer, where they literally can kind of point, click, and do this work themselves without having us involved. But remember that the platform includes an integration framework. So lots of times when we start adding data from the structured data environment, there's some work to be done to pull those files, call it out of SAP or Oracle or wherever they're residing, into our digital ledger to then express into the spreadsheet. And that even creates more value proposition for the customers. And so there's a little bit of work that needs to be done there. But once it's up and running, there isn't like there's maintenance work or anything that has to occur. Minimally, someone may come in and say, I want to change the structure of this. Can you guys help me out for a few days, and we'll charge for that? But for the most part, once we get it up and running, it's up and running, and we don't really see a lot of professional services revenue. And Charlie can speak to the declining professional services revenue as a percentage of revenue for our company, and kind of where we're headed with that.
Yeah, Martin, I'm gonna answer that while combining a couple of additional questions from Miles, Jerry, and Francois, and a few others. Let me start with this. We do not customize our platform, and so this is the reason why when Andy says we don't rewrite code, we're not establishing a SQL query for each new application or update for the customers. So let me use an example. When we originally signed EY, from the time the license was signed to the time that the customer went fully live was 6 weeks, with 5 employees of Boardwalk, not even full-time, but dedicated to that. That customer is 1 to 2 heads that are essentially maintaining that overall. That doesn't mean that we don't add on additional people as they ask. And this goes to the second point. The professional services are not like the traditional, what everyone I think thinks of as SAP. When I was at Intel, we brought in SAP, they literally took a wing of the office, 40 guys, from SAP. That's not the case, because you're not requiring a high maintenance aspect. So in terms of our headcount, we had a large bank, or we had a medium size or a smaller guy. We don't need to hire 5 new guys for that new customer, or 20 or others. The scaling is highly, highly efficient. And so that means operating leverage. Yes, we do need to expand in terms of general professional services. The other aspect of that professional services is it's not just in terms of the implementation. We get a lot of requests once we're in there of engagements. A better way to describe this is more like a consultant, but as a leading indicator to future applications. So we do the initial work, and guys say, we've got other problems. Can you take a look at it? We'll pay you to do an additional application. That in turn leads to another license that is then signed. So to Andy's point, the professional services are not a maintenance, but rather we bring people up. We are essentially, again, not customizing, but I would rather say is optimizing the customer's data and the customer's systems that are operating upon our platform. And again, this concept of it's our own platform, that they're running on top of. Any specific application that they said, could you design something specifically for me? It's really an application that we're designing on top of the platform. So really we're talking about APIs, for the most part, along with that design work. They own that work overall. But the core of it, as far as the operating of the data, is our digital ledger or Velocity product, which we did with this first bank. So all of what I'm trying to get to is it's not customization. It is not heavy headcount that's needed in order to scale the business or support existing customers. It's, consequently for investors, great operating leverage. And the other factor within that is that this also enables us to essentially have an incentive with the customers for them to expand with us without, again, this large overhang of every single time they want to change is a laborious and costly effort. For a better way of describing it, we're the non-SAP. But that doesn't mean you have to get rid of SAP, but rather, as Andy had in that one graph, it's more of a we fill a gap, and in particular in addressing this unstructured data with real-time solutions.
When you do a professional service package to implement or sort of launch a new platform into a client, like from the sounds of it, 6 weeks, is that like, what's the ballpark value of that professional service?
It's $40,000 basically over the 6 week. It's 2 to 3 people that are assigned to the project, and that's what we charge.
Okay.
And again, it varies, Martin. I mean, some have been, larger than that. Some have been overall. But the better thing that I think you have seen is existing customers who continue to pay for additional applications or deployment. Again, it depends on the given customer. We're not a cookie cutter. That's the other thing. As much as we said, we're not customization, we are not cookie cutters.
So one of the other things I'll point out, Martin, is that we do have a training and certification program where we will bring people in from large enterprises and certify them in a 1 week program on the Boardwalk platform. And a company like Qualcomm today has got certified people on their staff that have been trained and certified. And we don't do any professional services work, yet they continue to build and expand and add new applications, all doing the work themselves on the platform. Yeah, and so our goal is to minimize the professional services by continuing to provide technology that allows people to do this rapidly and on their own. As Charlie said, there are times when we almost have to come in and act as a consultant to help them. And mature companies like Salesforce.com, that's got a platform that they sell and license on a SaaS basis, still is running kind of in an 80-20 of license to professional services. And we think that still maintaining some level of professional services is important because customers will pay, and you learn kind of different things with regard to the product, maybe different features that they're willing to pay for that you can then potentially incorporate into a future product. So it's good to maintain that. But again, I think a healthy balance would be at about an 80-20 level, or maybe even less. In the financial services space that we're focused on, the goal there is to not provide any professional services from the Boardwalk team other than training and maybe some level of consulting. And that as we look at rolling this out across other banks, we're going to leverage partners like the partner that brought us into the big bank, who is thrilled to be making money on providing the professional services and the headcount needed to be able to go across the bank and implement, tens of thousands of these spreadsheets onto the Boardwalk platform. While it's easy, there's still a lot of administrative stuff to be done and everything. You don't just wave a magic wand and have it done, right? There's work to be done. But that's what we want to leverage. So, and that will continue to drive this very important number here, which is 86% gross margin business, where we're really focused on SaaS revenue, building that on a recurring basis and really increasing that top line with regard to this great SaaS revenue.
So until now, you haven't had a big channel network. Are you indicating that you're going to get more scale as you've already got one channel partner and layer on other ones where they can find the client, they can implement it, and then you share a bit of the SaaS revenues with them, but you just get that high margin SaaS revenue coming in?
Yes, Martin. So certainly in the financial services space, our goal is to leverage the channel and not do any direct sales. Again, if I walk into, XYZ Bank, that's a, $50 billion bank, I'm not going to get a meeting with the CIO. They're just not, right? We're a little tiny software company that's got this great product that's solving a big problem. But it's still really hard to get an audience. If we're brought in by a partner, so think of companies like Virtusa and Infosys and Capgemini, right? All of those, all of Tata, all of the companies that have got maybe 10,000 employees that are working in India for the bank, doing a lot of process work behind the scenes. They bring us in and say, we know you have this problem. We want to bring in this partner to help solve this problem. And then they do the work. It's perfect for us. So again, sell while you sleep. And that's how we're going to go at that channel. We think that we still need a direct sales force to go after certain targets. But if we could move the whole thing to a channel strategy eventually, that would be a great thing. But I think we'll still end up with some level of a mix based upon the market the different markets and how they buy.
Okay. All right. We do have a bunch of questions here, and we are almost an hour into this here. So on the news release, there was talk with the net contribution on the regarding the bank. And can you kind of clarify? I didn't quite understand what that meant. Could you clarify that wording?
Sure, that's a great Charlie question.
So the again, because, and this is the net proceeds, right, Martin?
Okay.
The wording in terms of net proceeds as far as the size of the deal, correct?
Okay. Yes.
So the reason for that is this was effectively a teaming agreement with an existing customer / partner that not only brought us into that financial institution, but also has been a key part as far as the qualification of that. And after the deal's done, we'll also be doing some additional work, not work orders or professional services, which is separate. In order to do this, there's a splitting of the revenue, and it's a little different. It's closer to a teaming agreement that you may see within a pooling of a government contract, but not a joint venture. If I've confused you already, there's the dilemma, because what we didn't want to do is overstate the gross revenue and then show the breakdown, including confidential information, both with the bank along with our partner, overall as far as the split in terms of that revenue sharing, which would be not at the cost of sales, but rather as some sort of OpEx. So when you start to cut this, we want to present a conservative number that we can effectively exceed without overstating the gross revenue, nor violate any sort of confidentiality. So what we opted to, after working with both counsel along with our auditor, was come up with the concept of net proceeds. I would indicate to anybody that the net proceeds you should view as equivalent to adjusted EBITDA, for a better way of describing it. This is what we're looking at. So again, we opted to be conservative. And yes, if people are going to probably be more surprised about what the revenue number is, but again, we had to balance a lot of different things while also preserving that we were the ones who have the license directly with the bank. This is not a three-party license, which would have been a real mess. So this was directly us with that large bank, period, while also being fair in terms of the revenue sharing, as far as the overall concept of the project.
I guess on that, is this project going, and really it's the contribution that comes out of the bottom at the end
Right.
that is all that matters, but is there going to be a relatively lower gross margin since you have to share some of the revenues with it, or is it the revenues kind of split higher up so you keep your sort of 86% flowing through you?
So this is unfortunately the limitation of IFRS versus GAAP. GAAP would have provided you with that. IFRS doesn't really give you the opportunity. This is why you go to GAAP as sort of a backup. And again, this is more from an accounting, but what does seem pretty apparent is this should not be a cost of sales. So the gross margins would stay the same, but it could be hit within considered to be effectively a sales marketing expense, Martin. What I'm arguing or making a position paper for, because it's not really clarified, is that I would view this as almost an equivalent of contra revenue. And again, we could very well report the gross revenue and then show the expense and then add some further disclosure within that, but then you start to get close to how much of that is confidential information overall. But so the closest thing for anybody who is familiar with it is a teaming agreement, which is essentially when a pool of parties combine their resources to win a large contract, and then you effectively do a revenue sharing. But again, we did not and insisted that this was not going to be a three-party license agreement. We mandated that this was going to be a direct license between us and the bank. And that, again, given the limitations of IFRS, is not 100% clear. Since we won't be reporting our audit financial statements for another, probably not until June, because we just closed our fiscal year end, we didn't want to overstate, nor did we want to provide a definitive statement that, quite frankly, even our auditors are saying, yeah, you threw us a curveball. So again, we tried to be conservative and give to all the investors saying, this is the net proceeds. This is our operating margin, adjusted EBITDA that you should think. We just turned in a very profitable deal for the next several years.
Gotcha. And I do want to get to the questions here, but just lastly, from my questions, and sort of it goes along with the bank deal, is you said with this bank deal, then I believe you said you should get to sort of a cash flow break even level. Could you just talk about, or what can you say about sort of expectations for the coming years in terms of burn or that?
Yeah, so burn will definitely improve, and we should. And again, I don't want to give forward guidance saying we will, as opposed to. But the path to profitability is essentially upon us right now. I know this has been asked as far as the break even, point, and again, because of how we treat that revenue, Martin, in terms of that teaming agreement, that offers a very large, window. Like, the break even could be as low as the 6 million annual, but could be as much as 7, low 7, and depends on that. Because ultimately, what we're trying to do is not chase just the top line, but rather generate as large a profit per contract overall. And so, somebody's looking for break even, I'll say 6 to 7 million. And the reason for that large variance is strictly because of limitations about how IFRS will allow me to treat this. There is, several questions in terms of, do you need to raise cash? And the answer is yes, but not for the reason in terms of our cash runway is going out, but quite frankly, is optics. That when we face with a lot of these larger customers, they would feel a lot more comfortable from an optics standpoint if they don't have to look at our balance sheet twice. And so, even with 2 million, of net cash, for some, customers, they would like to see it at 10 or 20. So that's the game that we were going to do. What I can tell you is that Andy and I have been approached for people who did want to give us money, and at these low stock prices, we deferred, within it, especially not only knowing this first large bank, but other subsequent announcements in the next month. So we want to hold off on that, and then also take our time with an appropriate way. Maybe more of a full pipe as opposed to a brokered private placement. And we have been taking steps in terms of, I think people have probably seen the announcement, not only did we become fully DTC eligible, including FAST, but we've also added on cross-border IR. We'll be getting, more advantageous OTC. So we're getting good cross-border liquidity as well. We will be improving our transfer agency capabilities as well, which quite frankly was a bit of an issue, but that should add yet additional liquidity for anybody on either side of I won't even say either side of the border, because we're also getting inquiries from Europe as well as interested investors.
So just to summarize, you don't need the cash to really fund your business directly going forward. It'll sure help the business grow if you have it there, as it'll give your clients a better sense. But it's
yeah, and let me address something. Andy kind of alluded to it, and this was when I actually interviewed. Andy has the ability to say no. We don't chase markets, because there are several markets that we could get into. I would argue, however, that there are markets that we are leaving money on the table because we're not actively pursuing. So I'm not going to, but these would be sales and marketing. I can think of the pharmaceutical track and trace as being a great market for us and for our product, an exceptional one. In the background, we're already starting to work with guys within that ecosystem, but we're not spending money on it, Martin. If we did, I believe that is a whole nother market that we could tap into without having to invest much, if anything, in the R&D arena. So don't get me wrong. If we had were to raise cash, the objective is for every dollar that we raise, we'd sure like to get at least a 5x return off of that in terms of from an operational standpoint.
So what you're saying, like Andy says no to different opportunities because you are somewhat cash balance sheet constrained.
Correct.
If that constraint was taken off, you could start going after a bunch more targets and hitting the accelerator.
Correct. And the best example of that is the banking market was always a very attractive one. We did not have the balance sheet to be able to do it. This partner came in with us, and I don't think Andy's even really tapped into. There are other partners who are bringing in. There's existing customers, people who've left one company have brought us new ones. So we've already got it. We're into the phase of we don't have to chase markets. We're getting referrals. But what I can tell you is there are opportunities out there that we had additional working capital. We could probably generate higher revenue growth. And again, the really nice thing is we're getting approached by not only new salespeople with deep experience, but also other referrals who are approaching Andy and myself to join the company. And I think if any investor wants to take a look at where the feet are going, we're hiring more in India, which is a great advantage, and we're also getting experienced salespeople who would like to add on to our pipeline. Well, not add on to the pipeline, close more deals in our pipeline.
Right. Question here from the audience: in the converting legacy customers to SaaS, how's your success rate been? And do you have many more conversions to do on that? How long until we don't have to discuss legacy stuff anymore?
Well, unfortunately, we have some legacy customers who just refuse to leave. They like our product.
Okay.
And so there will always be that aspect. For anybody who's been around the Canadian market long ago, this was PMC's era, a decade ago, in terms of they had to get rid of their legacy business before they could ramp their new business. And that caused a U-shape within the revenue, or a flat sort of revenue. Again, that's why what we've tried to put in the last couple of quarters is what's the growth, the underlying growth of the new model since 2018. And that's been a 35% CAGR, which, by the way, is not a number we're satisfied with, but shows that even with COVID and everything else proving ourselves, we still have had growth on our core model, even with that overhang of the legacy business. But to your point, Martin, I would say 90% of the legacy impact is done.
Okay. You discussed your raising equity. Question here regarding the SP decline. Do you have a plan to let your story out? Don't actually understand what that question means.
I think it's the so our share price took a
okay
thing over the last week in particular. And some of that was actually due to, we were held back due to the, long story is we had some equity awards that had to be released more recently due to constraints because of our predecessor. We came through this through an RTO with Woodcomp. We weren't able to actually release several tranches of RSUs until recently. So we got that cleared out, and so there's no headroom off of it. But the in terms of the sales price or stock price, you know, the number one focus is announce more closing of deals, and that you will see in terms of the next several weeks and beyond. That was probably the biggest resistance level on the stock overall. Beyond that, we, as I mentioned before, we've taken several other steps to increase liquidity. We know of several pockets, both in Canada and the US, of investors who come in, and we've had to try and improve that. That's what we did with DTC eligibility. That's what we did in terms of transfer agent improvement. So I think you'll already see improvement in liquidity, and that in turn should, along with the announcements of further traction of the business and new closures of business, we expect that to increase the stock price.
All right. With the banking, the deal that you guys announced, how long is that implementation going? Are we there? Is there a big sort of launch date now? It's live in what, 4 weeks or something like that? Or any milestones associated with that? Or you're just going to roll it out, it'll happen, and then?
Sure. So there's a standard acceptance period within the contract.
Yeah.
And we're in the middle of that acceptance period. We believe fully that the product will be accepted. We've already run 2 POCs for the bank, and we're very deeply ingrained in the entire kind of process of rolling this out across lots and lots of different people, including the partner and bank employees themselves. So you know, we're kind of in that standard process right now.
Yeah, from a functional standpoint, Martin, there really wasn't any. There was a question I saw before the questions got removed. There is no specific earnout or R&D or technical proof any longer. This is more of a standard. And this bank, quite frankly, I'll tell you, wanted us to sign their original contract as a, you know, as is, and then with a schedule to addendum. And that was probably the biggest, you know, hold up overall. And that standard acceptance was just something that was a given. But the interesting thing, you know, was when originally we were presented by the bank saying, you got to sign this master agreement. It was like Henry Ford. You can have any color so long as it's black. What I will tell you is that bank wanted the product enough that they adjusted their own agreement that now it looks like a shiny red car. And my point being is, even when they said there's absolutely no edits you can make, they made a lot of edits on their own to make sure that this product came up. So again, we're not taking this acceptance period lightly. You know, this is viewed as a multi-year contract with more expansion beyond it. So just like profitability, that's not the end line. That's just a line in the sand. You know, the real goal is how do we get, you know, this and other customers up such that Boardwalk's a $50-100 million revenue company in the next 4 years.
All right. And I guess with this, it is low code and not complicated coding systems. So I'm guessing you don't probably get a lot of technical leverage when you hopefully sign up your next bank, but you get a lot of, you're building up domain expertise. So knowledge problems like, oh yeah, we figured out a good way to solve this at one of our other clients. So we can now implement, we don't have to think so hard and have so many meetings on how to solve this problem because we've already done that.
Yes, well, so not to get too technical, but the bank, so first of all, every bank has this problem. Every major company has this problem. What drove this bank to act faster than some other banks is because they were penalized by the OCC, and the OCC said, fix it. And they made an example out of the bank, which is okay. They have to do that. That's the way that they build compliance requirements. The net is that the bank had been trying to solve this problem for several years with licensed software technology from companies that we know very well. The issue is that it can't scale the way that they were doing it. And the uniqueness of the Boardwalk platform, which allows us to be able to very rapidly scale without having to write any code, is so that's number one. And number two is the ability for us to continue to allow the employees to use Excel as the user interface. Those two things are uniquely different than anything on the market today, and is what drove the bank to sign this enterprise deal across all three major business units of the bank to basically solve this problem. And we believe that when other banks see the way in which we've solved this for the bank, the first bank, that they will, and if they just spend a little bit of time understanding it, they will recognize that this is really the only way to do it. And we're going to be in a terrific position, you know, from a competitive standpoint because of the technology. So now it's just a matter of us getting to the partners, which we're doing every day. I've got a call this afternoon with a new partner, basically say, here's what we did. This is why it was different. This is why it's important. This is why you need to partner with us to take this to your 30 banking clients and be a partner with us. And so it's a matter of how quickly can we get that out there and get the word out. And that's going to be a very big part of our next fiscal year here, is to really focus in on this banking channel and drive additional banks. And I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't see at least another announcement fairly soon on another bank.
All right. So investors should be keeping their eyes open for more banking client announcements over the next 3, 6, 9 months.
Correct.
All right. We are well over an hour here, guys. We should probably wrap this up. Any final comments you want to make, or things that I think we're pretty thorough here, but anything you want to highlight or just mention, little things that may have not been addressed?
You know, Martin, I think it was an excellent session. I hope that the people that were on, you know, if they have any other questions, they can certainly feel free to contact either myself or Charlie directly. Here's our contact information. I think, again, the Radius platform has been great for us, and we really appreciate you and the interest that you and your clients and investors have in Boardwalk. And hopefully we won't be another year before we get to do another session, and we'll have a great, you know, maybe in 6 months, we'll have another one, and we'll have a lot to talk about, a lot more to talk about. Sounds great. Andy, Charlie, thanks a lot for chatting. Thanks for the kind words. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mark.